So Intel's new Arc B580 changes the game, literally. It comes with a brand new Xe2 architecture, which comes with improved utilization and work distribution, and now comes with the new Xe2 render slices as well. At the heart of Xe2 though is a new 2nd gen Xe core, and the B580 has 20 of them in total. And the main thing about these new Xe2 cores is that they have 256 kilobytes of shared L1 cache for each Xe core. And this should improve overall latency, relying less on other memory subsystems, being much closer to the Xe cores. It also comes with their new vector engines, which have higher density, which should improve performance per watt and utilization. And in addition to that, we have the new Raytracing units, which boosts overall performance of ray tracing with dedicated hardware. The Intel B580 or the new Battlemage GPUs will also come with the new XeSS 2 pipeline, which comes with the new XeSS frame generation as well as XeLO or Xe low latency. And later on in this video, we're going to assess the performance of the new XeSS 2 frame gen, so stay tuned for that. Other specs include 2560 shader units, 160 TMUs, 80 ROPs, and a total of 12GB of VRAM with GDDR6. And the VRAM is on a 192-bit bus as well. So with the B580, you're getting more TMUs and ROPs than both the 4060 and the RX 7600, whilst coming with 4GB more VRAM and a higher memory bus. And to top it off, it costs $45 less than the 4060 and about the same as the RX 7600 in price. Now I'll leave the test bench specifications that we're going to be using today in the description, but without wasting any more of your time, let's jump straight into Black Ops 6 at 1080p. Now we tested it at balanced settings, and this should be more accurate to what people will be actually playing at, especially in an online shooter. The B580 shows a strong middle ground, edging out the 4060 in averages and lows. But the 7600, well, that shows a massive lead, especially in 1% lows. But Cyberpunk shows impressive performance due to Intel's fine wine driver improvements, and with the new Xe2 architecture. It beats the 4060 massively and the RX 7600 while edging past the RTX 3060 Ti, but does fall short a little bit in lows compared to the 3060 Ti. Now F124 reveals the B580 falling short of both the 4060 and 7600, but it got within a hair's length of the 4060 and 1% lows. But it's important to note that averages aren't the complete story. 1% lows highlight the worst case frame consistency, which in this case, the B580 would be pretty good. Now Far Cry 6 is another story. The B580 leads in averages over the 4060, but ever so slightly falls behind in lows by less than half, revealing the persistent optimization issues. Now we reran this test multiple times and we got the same result. And since no other GPU had this, it would most likely be down to some sort of optimization issue. In general, the RX 7600 shows a robust performance lead here. Forza Horizon 5 again shows a lead in averages over the 4060, but this time also in lows. But that said, the 7600 continues to put up a fight here. Now in Rainbow Six Siege, we ran this at more competitive settings, much like Black Ops 6, because it's a more likely scenario. And this is another situation where the lows severely fell behind. We got worse lows than some of the budget cards like the 3050 6GB, but averages fell slightly behind the 4060. But to show the full story, we pulled up a frame time chart. While we averaged around 3 milliseconds frame time, the B580 peaks at around 47 milliseconds per frame at its worst, and repeatedly had consistent spikes throughout the run. Now again, much like last time, we ran this multiple times and we still exhibited the same result. So this is probably another instance of optimization struggles with Intel Arc. Now back to gaming performance, and in Shadow of the Tomb Raider, the B580 shows a slight edge over the 7600 in averages, but loses in lows ever so slightly. All the while, the 4060 takes the cake here, but not by a huge margin. Now Total Warhammer shows an impressive lead on the B580, surpassing the 7600 and even the 4060, while getting quite close to the 3060 Ti in performance. Lows didn't seem to be an issue here as well, despite the nature of the game, which was surprising. Looking at averages for these 8 games at 1080p, you're getting about 4060 performance here, with the B580 beating that by around 2%, while the RX 7600 takes the lead over the B580 by around 10%. But even without showing you, the 7600 might be the better value in rasterization. But we'll have to see later, as the B580 does have a neat trick up its sleeve in the form of ray tracing performance and upscaling, which might give it an edge. But if you're new here and you've watched this far, make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe, as these videos take really long to make, so it would be much appreciated. Now 1440p in Black Ops 6. We evidently became more GPU bound, but the B580 kept its middle ground gracefully, outpacing the 4060 in averages and lows, but that 7600 continues to show its advantage in this game, handily outperforming the B580. Cyberpunk continues to show Arc's general improvements in optimization and performance, fully taking the lead over the 4060 and 7600 in both averages and lows, leaving them pretty much in the dust. It's also impressive that averages on the B580 came in the rearview mirror of the 4070, while beating the 3060 Ti completely. F124 on the other hand shows the B580 nearing the bottom of the chart, however it's not far behind the 7600 and especially the 4060. Far Cry 6 once again saw lackluster lows, losing even to the older 3060 12GB, but averages eclipsed the 4060 while falling just shy of the 7600. So this pretty much affirms optimization issues are still prevalent. In Forza Horizon 5, the B580 regains its touch, consistently beating the 4060 in averages and lows, whilst the 7600 claims the edge slightly ahead of the B580. In Rainbow Six Siege, much like at 1080p, 1% lows continue to suffer, but its averages led against both the 4060 and 7600 this time around as we became more GPU bound. Shadow of the Tomb Raider at 1440p this time highlights a greater lead on the B580 versus the 7600. It even beat the 4060 in lows, at the same time being in a hair's length in averages with the 4060. So impressive performance overall. Now Total Warhammer, much like we saw on 1080p, saw impressive performance at 1440, continuing the lead over the 4060 and 7600. So overall averages for 1440p. The B580 came within a hair's breadth of the 7600, with that only leading by less than 1%, while beating the more expensive 4060 by 8%. Now in our Rasterization Summary for both 1080 and 1440p, the B580 shows a strong middle ground at $249, with slightly less performance per dollar than a 7600, but leagues ahead of the 4060 in value. However, if you don't mind buying used, you can always get a 3060 Ti for $260, which is more expensive but does have more performance. A massive trade-off, however, is the mere 8GB of VRAM on the 3060 Ti compared to 12 on the B580. Other options could be a 3060 12GB for $210, which has better value than the B580 when used, which gets you that extra VRAM, but the B580 remains super competitive at brand new. Other GPUs you can consider is the 6750 XT at around $300 US, which also gets you that 12GB of VRAM, or the 6650 XT 8GB at around $195 or $200. Now if you don't care about efficiency, you can skip this part, but the B580 was the most efficient card at 108 watts, being 9% more efficient than the previous efficiency king, the 4060, and 37% more efficient than the RX 7600. And if you're considering use like the 3060 Ti or 3060 12GB, the B580 will also be hugely more efficient than those two cards. Now ray tracing at 1080p was pretty impressive. In Cyberpunk, the B580 shows a strong lead over the 7600 and even the 4060, which was previously Nvidia's claim to fame over something like the 7600. It also handily outperforms the last gen 3060 Ti. In F1, weirdly unlike in Rasterization, lows fell behind compared to the 4060 and 7600. However, averages were at the same time higher than both the 4060 and 7600. Again, this could hint at potential optimization issues, and we reran this test multiple times to confirm that. Now Far Cry 6 showed strong performance, at least in averages, eclipsing both the 7600 and 4060 once again, but the 7600 did lead in lows, however only slightly. Shadow of the Tomb Raider shows an impressive middle ground, leaning over the 7600 while falling behind the 4060 slightly in averages. At the same time, the B580 leads in lows over the 4060. On average, the B580 leads by 8% over the 4060 and a considerable 15% over the 7600. In 1440p starting in Cyberpunk, the B580's lead widens over the 4060 with its extra 4GB of VRAM allowing the B580 to stretch its legs with higher lows. It also handily outperforms the 3060 Ti and especially the 7600, even coming in less than 10 frames behind the 4070, which is definitely impressive. F1 at 1440 was a different story compared to 1080, as some of the 8GB cards like the 7600 and 4060 start to really struggle, with lows on the B580 taking an ever slight lead. It seems the VRAM limitations on the 8GB cards and the optimization issues we observed at 1080p outweigh each other, which explains the higher average frame rate compared to the 7600 and 4060. Now Far Cry 6 is a bit of a mess, revealing optimization issues again for the B580, but the other 8GB cards appear to really starting to struggle. As such, the B580 takes the crown and averages of the 4060 and 7600, but imagine what the performance would have looked like in the lows if these optimization struggles were sorted. The extra 12GB of VRAM would have been the advantage in this scenario, delivering higher lows than the 8GB cards and a better overall experience. Now finally, in Shadow of the Tomb Raider, pretty much all the cards are stacked against each other, with the B580 leading the pack but the 4060 not far behind. It does handily outperform the 7600 though. Now averages for 1440p reveal a wider increase from the 4060 to B580 of 16%, while it demolishes the 7600 by 23%. Overall, it's really dang impressive performance from the B580. And when we look at value for both 1080 and 1440p ray tracing, it's no surprise that the B580 leads the pack in performance per dollar. It provides even more value compared to buying a 3060 12GB or 3060 Ti used, and smashes the 7600 and 4060. Other cards that you might want to consider as well is the A750 for around $190 US, which has really impressive ray tracing performance as well, and you can get that for brand new. Now for efficiency, if you really care, the B580 is better than a 4060 and especially the 7600. Now let's finally get into XeSS 2 frame generation performance. Now F124 is the only game that XeSS 2 supports, so we had to get early access. And performance for the most part is pretty good, except for the lows being quite lackluster. And this revealed a 9% uplift compared to using FSR3's frame gen on the same GPU, the B580. FSR3 frame gen having 43% higher lows, which impacted its experience. At the same time, compared to DLSS 3.5 frame gen on the 4060, XeSS 2 frame gen performed 24% better on average, and outperformed the 7600 with FSR 3 frame gen by 17%. Now when we look at display latency using Intel's Presentmon, it's plain to see why the new XeSS 2 frame gen had higher latency. And this is despite using Intel's new XeLL or Xe low latency, which is enabled once again when you enable frame gen. On average, it got 285% higher latency. Now we asked Intel what the issue is, and they pointed us to a new driver, version 6252, which is what we tested here, and we got the exact same result. I'm not entirely sure what the issue is, but in its current state, XeSS 2 frame gen is in its early stages. That said, we will have more videos coming soon highlighting the quality differences and future performance improvements, and also the more games that get supported soon. Now in benchmarks, starting with the PureBench Adobe suite, the B580 shows impressive performance in both After Effects and Premiere Pro, handily outperforming both the 4060 and 7600. The new encoding performance coupled with enhanced 3D rendering capabilities means this is a pretty good budget creator card for content creators. Now in Blender, the B580 does lose to the 4060 by quite a large margin, but it does outperform the 7600 by quite a bit. Obviously NVIDIA's better integration of CUDA will outperform any day of the week, so it's no surprise. Finally, in SpecViewPerf, the B580 shows strong 3ds Max performance, almost matching the 4060, but it does lose quite a bit in Maya and SolidWorks. The 7600 though is in a league of its own, at least in Maya, but the B580 puts up a fight in 3ds Max, but does fall short a bit in SolidWorks. Now for overclocking, we managed a 20% uplift in power limit, a 250 MHz uplift in clocks, and a 20% uplift in voltage. This is all the while increasing the memory speed to 21 gigabits per second, and this resulted in plus 20% power and plus 7% in temperatures on average, whilst in Thermark 2 GPU stress test. In real gaming averages of 1440p rasterization, we got around 8% more performance on average. And this allows it to beat the 3060 Ti in rasterization, which increases the B580's value even more. So overall, it's a pretty impressive uplift without impacting the temperatures too much. Also, before I forget, this card is also dead silent even when overclocking. Like, just listen. So that's the new Intel Arc B580. And overall, I have to say, it's got pretty competitive performance in rasterization, often matching or slightly outperforming the RX 7600 and eclipsing the RTX 4060 while being $45 cheaper. Its ray tracing performance is also outstanding, significantly better than both the 7600 and the 4060, with that 12GB of VRAM providing a strong advantage at higher resolutions. Benchmarks show great creative performance in the Adobe suite, so this would be good for content creation as well. And that's all the while it's highly efficient at just 108 watts on average, surpassing the efficiency of competing GPUs by a huge margin. And to top it all off, it's got great overclocking headroom, allowing you to increase the value of the GPU even more without significantly increasing noise or temperatures or even power consumption. Now, of course, since it's an ARC card, it does evidently come with disadvantages. Even to this day, with all the driver improvements that have happened over time, there still are persistent optimization issues that we observe, especially in 1% lows and frame time consistency in some titles. An XeSS 2 frame generation shows potential, but it really needs refinement, particularly in addressing the latency issue. At $249, the Intel Arc B580 offers fantastic value for gamers seeking excellent ray tracing and solid rasterization performance in a new GPU. While optimization challenges exist, its performance, efficiency, and VRAM capacity makes it a standout option, particularly for those looking for future-ready features. Anyways guys, that's all for today. Make sure to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. Also make sure to click this video on the screen right now.